All right, we're back for another Best Ball Breakfast. We took Monday off for Memorial Day, but we are back for our Wednesday doubleheader. Draft number 1 with the defending Best Ball Mania champ, Pat Kerrane. Draft number 2 with Rotoviz's Shawn Siegele. It's a doubleheader here. Best Ball Mania 4 drafts. My road to 150 stream drafts continues. Let's win $3 million today.
Oh, another Influencer 101 for the backward hats, bro. Rigged!
Zach Ertz with no Tyler Algier bringback? Yikes.
You reached around for correlation? That's a no-no. You ADP bros disgust me. How about you just live a little?
Handcuffing might actually be a way to get unique if the field's avoiding it.
The Wi-Fi at this resort is a disaster?
These fucking streamers don't have player takes. What if a piss boy draft is the room you need?
Oh!
All right, GMs are around. JGFC is coining us the trio of you, me, and Shawn as PSP. I guess I kind of like that acronym there. Pat, how are you doing? How was your Memorial Day weekend? How many drafts did you do over the past 3 or 4 days?
Not a ton. I mean, I've got a bunch of slow drafts going right now, which I don't love. But that, the Bulldog I wanted to do, the underdog high stakes thing, and that's slows only. So they locked me into slows. So I've got those going. But I also have, I carved out some time to do some fast drafts. But I'm not really firing at Best Ball Mania a ton right now. I did some of the DraftKings $10 stuff. And yeah, I did, I think, a couple Chow Chows. But I burned through most of my Chow Chows already. So I'm trying to save those now.
Yeah, it looks like the Chow Chow, I did a few of those over the weekend as well. 60% filled. So I bet by the end of the week, Chow Chow is full, but knowing underdog, they're going to give us a chow chow.
I think we will. Yeah. The chow chow.
It does have a really
call it the chow chow. Come on.
Chi chow. Are you plotting out your how much you're firing at these things?
No.
Or are you just willing? I mean, that is the benefit.
It's willy nilly. Yeah. I mean, I've been encouraged to fire by people who should normally be telling me not to do crazy things.
Does his name rhyme with Smesh Chiam?
Well, Smesh Chiam thinks I should fire everything, but no, my accountant is you should really play a lot of best ball this year. So okay. But I don't know. I mean, I have, to be honest, looking at the DK555, which is 150 max. I mean, that's a lot of money to spend on a best ball tournament, and there's $1 million up top, and then it's falls off a lot. Yeah. So I'm in most scenarios, even if I'm I have a huge edge in that tournament, which I probably don't, I'm gonna lose a lot of money.
Yeah,
because you either win first or you lose a lot of money. Is kind of how that tournament works. And I don't know. I don't find that all that appealing. So I've done a couple of those, but I don't think I'll get close to maxing it. And then I'm kind of sort of seeing what else is coming down the pike. Because there's been, I didn't know the Bulldog was coming, and that's been fun. So
yeah, that's a nice structure. It's one of those where, 227 entries. This is the $500 one, slows only, as Pat mentioned. The only thing that's tough is if you do max enter it, that's what, $6,000 with a $30,000 top prize. So that's tough there.
Yeah, although the Bulldog's cool because you advance 4 out of 12.
Yeah.
And then there's decent payouts for advancing. So it's sort of you obviously are risking the 6,000, but if you max it, you're sort of your chances of completely busting aren't nearly as high as in Best Ball Mania or something. You probably will get some money back from, advancing a team or two.
So I did, before our draft, we've loading in your rankings from Legendary Upside. I did notice you had put out a refresh yesterday. Were there any big changes? Are you now starting to tinker with this training camp news, or what did you see in that update?
Just kind of little tinkers here and there. I mean, I've been trying to dial in. One thing I did is I lowered Kamara, and I did kind of an override thing to kind of push him down. I'm working on trying to get these to feed DraftKings rankings as well. And I was over on DraftKings, and he was popping up as like the value, and I was like, I am not interested in taking him at all right now. So I kind of overrode him. I went and looked at what Drew Davenport had put out about a month ago on Kamara. He was just saying like, there's nothing magical about 6 games here. Like this could be quite a bit longer than that if it, we don't know basically, and the NFL can do whatever they want, and he's facing felony charges. So that was one that I was like, I just don't want Kamara right now. So I think he's down at like 110 or 111. And then, I've done a little bit of tinkering. This the Hopkins situation is definitely interesting. It's going to shake things up. So I've been lowering some of the Bills and the Chiefs a little bit. It's kind of preparation of that. I had bumped Hopkins up ahead of ADP after he got cut because I just figured there's a good chance he signed somewhere good.
Yeah.
And the bar was low, obviously, with how bad the Cardinals were going to be.
I thought my take, and I said this yesterday on Splash Play, was like, it always seemed to me like the Hopkins ADP was baking in him leaving and landing somewhere good. Is like kind of how I felt like it was already established.
Yeah, although I was I played the Hopkins situation a little poorly. I was taking him early, like pre-draft, and then there was reports that they weren't trading him, and I was like, oh God, like, am I going to have to deal with Hopkins on the Cardinals? It didn't occur to me that they were just completely out and were going to cut him this late in the game, which probably should have occurred to me, like that was a strong possibility.
Did you have any big movements on Marquise, Rondell, or Trey McBride?
Yeah, Marquise and Rondell have come up a fair amount, and although the ADP caught up pretty quickly on Marquise, so I don't think I like took off the override, so it's kind of a normal rank. I'm still ahead of the ADP on Marquise, but not by like a ton. Rondale, I'm like significantly ahead of ADP on. The Trey McBride situation is a little trickier because like they're gonna suck, and then Ertz comes back, and so at the end of the season, how much are you getting from Trey McBride when you finally expect the quarterback play to be better, but then he's got tight end route competition. And I just, if you don't have all the routes as a tight end, it's just really tricky.
Yep. All right. For the audio listeners, we are off to the races in our first BBM draft. Drew, the 105 here: Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Cooper Kupp, Tyreek Hill off the board. I am a little light on CMC here early. If you're worried about a wide receiver avalanche, I'm always down for that. What do you think?
I like CMC.
Let's do it.
I've been taking CMC in some of these drafts where he falls a little like the 4 spot. I don't know. We are in a little bit of tough shape at wide receiver now already in this room, but CMC at 5 is pretty nice.
Yeah, we do have the full badge brigade out here, but never going to complain about taking CMC at 5. One other interesting thing I noticed happening, and again, I only have the drafts I do on stream to go by, but in both of my drafts yesterday, Travis Kelce fell to 1-9. And I didn't know if that was just, coincidence in those two rooms, or I saw a Davis tweet that made me wonder, are people like worried about DeAndre Hopkins going to the Chiefs and making Travis Kelce less valuable? Is that actually happening?
I think that is what's happening. Yeah. I think there's some credence to that where like you have, both guys are basically kind of target earners. It's not like they'd be adding, kind of more of a deep threat on the outside or something. So I do think it would hurt a little bit. I think I'd take him at 109 though. Yeah, I definitely would. And honestly, that does feel like a little bit of a tier break, right? Like Kelce's kind of formed his own little mini tier. Like without this Hopkins stuff, we haven't seen him really he doesn't really slide a ton.
Right. And I think too, there's an element with Kelce, and I guess you could say early tight ends in general, that's similar to like anyone watching this stream. Like we all agree like, oh, there's all kinds of value late at tight end, or we all agree the 3rd round running backs are great. But it also means that like smart drafts leaning into those other pockets are probably not occurring at the frequency that they should, right? If no one wants to take the anchor running back in round one, or if no one wants to take Travis Kelce in round one because we all like the late tight end value, it is just an interesting thing to me. And I have tried to force myself, hey, be more open to 0RB builds, knowing so many people are taking running backs in that third round. There is an element of uniqueness just to not doing that build.
Yeah, I was going through the teams I've done in the Bulldogs so far, and just like no 0 running back teams. I mean, the closest I got was taking Aaron Jones in the 5th.
Yeah. So we are on the clock here. I
think we got to get Smith or Higgins.
I was going to say Devonta, and then that gives us a chance to get third round Hurts or potentially a running back we like.
That's the way to play it. Yeah. We can't get. I mean, Smith is not like my favorite pick at this point in the second round, but I think he's worthy of a second round pick. And otherwise we're going to be in really rough shape.
Yeah, and we have some interesting builds going on here. The professor, I think, getting kind of a uniqueness play here. AJ Brown and Nick Chubb, the kind of essentially doing, because I think where those ADPs normally line up, it's pretty hard to get AJ Brown and Chubb unless you're taking AJ Brown at what, like the 2 or the 3 spot.
Yeah, which I have seen some people do. I've seen some people get weird and go AJ Brown early, and they're trying to line up Devonta Smith and Jalen Hurts and get the full stack, which is kind of fun because you can then get Goddard falls to the end. So if you wanted to do, maybe this is more of like a puppy strategy where it's kind of like you're just getting the full stack and you're just hoping to blast through a smaller field.
Right.
That, I could see it because, if Goddard falls to the late, getting what I say, 5th? No, I mean the 6th. He falls to the late 6th. So you could get all 3, get the whole offense.
All right, we'll see what we're going to do here in the third round. I am going to give the people a coffee pour. I took on Monday, since there was no best ball breakfast, I had iced coffee, which I love doing my cold brew, Pat, but you don't get the pour equity out of it. So I had to take advantage on the holiday of getting my cold brew, but here you guys go. Oh, that hits nice. That hits real.
Why don't you put the cold brew in the pot? Put some ice in there and get it all. Because then you get the ice clinking a little bit. I mean,
what if I actually
just got the next level, dude?
What if I got the drip set up like a true drip, and I just had a second mic back there that just heard the little drops coming in? Pat, we were just rewarded a nice. This is fun here.
This is very fun.
So the audio listeners, we did start Christian McCaffrey, a little worried about the avalanche, kind of reaching for Devonta Smith a few picks ahead of ADP. But the benefit of being in a badge brigade where everyone's kind of staying in their own lane, doing their own thing, is it does mean Jalen Hurts falls to us at pick 29 for that Hurts Devonta stack with CMC. That's fun.
That is very fun. And then the Josh Allen drafter there didn't have any Bills. And Patrick Mahomes went to the Bengals drafter. So he's going to be kind of trying to backdoor it with Mahomes. He's got the week 17 bring back already. So I feel like we got the cleanest of the elite quarterbacks. We got the cleanest stack, unless there's going to be an Andrews Lamar on the corner here.
So one thing I want to talk about in this spot, and I think it was something you identified really well last year, is which structures kind of fit together nicely. And I'm curious how you think about this spot here, because at 44, I would say Hawkinson would be available. At 53, you'd have Kittle or Pitts available. And at pick 68, maybe Goddard available. Obviously, Goddard would be a smash with the Hurts thing. But is the elite tight end, elite running back, and elite QB, is that too many detours through 5 rounds? Or do you think you could recover from it?
It's probably too many through 5, but I don't think it's too many through 6, especially when you're getting guys like Pitts and Goddard, who I think do offer kind of like a 5th round elite tight end type of value. I think those guys are really nice values for the spike week upside they do provide, in the 6th round at tight end. So I've been willing to go, with that 3rd detour in round 6. And then at that point, you're kind of locked into a 7th round wide receiver, but then you still have 4 wide receivers through 7 rounds, which is Hayden Wink's golden rule. And I think that's something like when I did my research last year, I was showing 4 through 9 being really important. He's talked 4 through 7. I think with wide receivers kind of getting pushed up, we want to be going with the 4 through 7. Ideally, like in every draft, I don't really want to be veering away from that too hard. Obviously, you got to play every draft, but that's like been kind of a real point of emphasis for me. But you can still hit that even if you get the tight end in the 6th. So
because what you probably end up pushing is RB2 even more with Christian McCaffrey. Like sometimes I'm taking that 10th round Zach Charbonnet type pick. You probably are even grabbing another wide receiver there if it falls. We are on the clock here by ADP. Drake London.
I like Drake London. I just think he's a good pick. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, kind of looking at these wide receivers here. Did you adjust DJ Moore in your ranks? Because we've had quite the DJ Moore battles lately, specifically on ship chasing last week.
Yeah, so I brought DJ Moore down in the ranks. We had like just in Discord a back and forth, and Leone was making the case against where he was going in the 4th round. And I was like, the stuff that I'm looking at says he's more of kind of a 5th round value. But I had him in my ranks kind of around ADP, partly because I was just like, I don't know who else to really put above him. I think he's fine, but Leone was really kind of pounding the table like, no, dude, he's super overvalued. So I was like, well, if my stuff says he's more of a 5th round value and Leone's like passionately making the case against, I should probably have him closer to kind of that 5th round value and figure out, who else I'm more comfortable taking. So that's what I did. But I do think he's a 5th round value. And on chip chasing, I think, I was hearing that he's more of like a 6th, 7th round value, which I don't really agree with.
Right. The QBs do continue to slide in this room. I'm surprised are the Chase Higgins drafters. The Chase drafter, I guess they took Mahomes, so they weren't interested. We are on the clock here. You could go Godwin, you could go Pitts. I don't know if we want to do double Falcons. Anything else jumping out to you?
I think we have to go wide receiver. Godwin's fine. I've been kind of in this situation right now. I'm considering in a Bulldog reaching for Smith-Njigba over Godwin. But where are you at on that? Because that's the decision I have to make right now.
I mean, let's have some fun. Let's take some JSN. I mean, I've mentioned this on streams before. I've had like cognitive dissonance on this in that I fucking love JSN. I want to draft a shit ton of him. I also was convinced we were going to get much cheaper JSN than we are getting right now.
Go on DraftKings if you want cheap JSN. You can get him in the 7th.
Wow. I know, and I'll talk with Shawn here in the 2nd block. I know he's super high on JSN. I love this Seattle offense, how it's setting up for them this year. So I'm never going to poke holes in JSN, even at 5.3 or 5.5.
Yeah, I mean, it does feel like a little Amon-Ra St. Brownie to me, where like he could come on down the stretch in a huge way. I get I think every concern that you would raise about JSN is like very reasonable. Like, how is he going to run enough routes? Like, I don't really know, because Lockett's good and Metcalf's good. And are they going to run like exclusively out of the 3 wide set? Like, definitely not. This is a Pete Carroll team. So like, yeah, I'm not sure how it happens, but I think he's really talented. I think he's the best wide receiver prospect in the class. I think he has like a little bit of a floor issue. Is he really that guy that we saw in 2021, or is that a mirage? He dealt with a severe hamstring injury. Does that flare up again? So I think he's got bust potential, but if he is the guy from 2021 and stays healthy, I think he's getting there. Yeah. I don't know. Again, I don't know exactly how, but I think it's happening. And he pairs so well with Geno. Geno's good at getting the ball out quickly and accurately in the short area. And he just gets open at will, right? So, and underneath. So, I mean, I think he could get peppered with targets down the stretch.
Yeah, I'm fully on board with that take. The chat mentioning that the room is just daring someone to take naked Burrow, which is what happens. Burrow finally goes at pick 58 after Justin Herbert to an unstacked team. I'm trying to find the T. Higgins drafter. Where's the Higgins drafter? So Raise It here had a choice between Justin Fields and Burrow because he had Higgins and DJ Moore. He ended up going with Fields instead, but an interesting dynamic with Burrow. It's kind of I've noticed a little bit like the Tua situation where there's like the two obvious guys at the top. And for whatever reason, those drafters are starting to feel more and more emboldened to push it.
Yeah, I think probably in this room, people are just worried about getting locked out. Although, yeah, and the guy who took Burrow is the one dude who wouldn't be worried about that, right? He's gone true zero running back. I've been I don't understand how Burrow isn't just a feature of the 4-5 turn, which he kind of is in the Bulldog. Like he's definitely falling more there consistently. But like the kind of early to mid 4th round Burrow ADP is like never made sense. It's like, who are you getting him with? Just naked Burrows? There's just a million naked Burrow teams out there.
So as the prophecy foretold, Pat, Dallas Goedert lines up for us directly at ADP. We can get this Jalen Hurts double stack with Smith and Goddard. We're taking this detour, right?
100%.
At ADP, not even having to reach for it. We now have pretty much kind of max flexibility for this draft positionally with Jalen Hurts, CMC, Devonta Smith, Drake London, JSN, and Dallas Goedert, and does give us kind of the green light to rip wide receivers until the well runs dry here.
Yep.
Which it will.
Which it will. Which would be one pick, I think, is what we're going to get.
Near the bottom of the well.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah. Get ready to take Alec Pierce here in the 7th.
Want to give a shout out to you and Eric Beimfor had a very fun, long conversation on your guys' Spike Week Legendary Upside collab show last week. It's just an absolute marathon pod. I was actually wondering if something was wrong with the file because an hour in, you guys said you were going to power it down. And I was like, oh, he must have accidentally like uploaded the MP3 twice or something. And then you guys kept going. But this is a roundabout way of saying very good conversation on Kadarius Toney. He's a guy I haven't gotten a lot because I've been using your rankings primarily, Pat, and he's down there below. And I thought you guys both had. It's kind of analogous to our DJ Moore combo too, right? You know, it is not that different.
It's true. Although I think the Hopkins thing makes you, I mean, it made me feel kind of good about the ranking, even if he doesn't sign there, because I think you realize like pretty quickly how shaky things feel. I think Bateman, I know it's like I was way early.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not early. So we're on the clock here. I just toggle over the wide receivers. You're looking at Zay Flowers, Bateman, Michael Thomas, Sutton. I mean, I've been drafting Bateman.
Are there any running backs at like crazy values?
You got Dameon Pierce, 13 picks pass, but I don't think we fuck around with Bateman here.
Yeah, I think you're right. We'll have another running back value later.
Exactly. I mean, the top of the board right now, I mean, you got Pierce, you got Swift, you got Pacheco, Dalvin Cook, Rachaad White, Akers. So it does seem, and by the time we pick next, these other wide receivers, Flowers, and even if you want to include Michael Thomas or Cortland Sutton in that last, gasp of a wide receiver tier, those guys are going to be gone too. So, but talk to me a little bit about Zay versus Bateman. Do you think of them as similar bets, or what you win when you win? Is it different for those two?
Yeah, I think they're I don't know. I mean, my thing with Bateman is that like I was impressed by what he showed last year. I mean, his yards per out run was awesome. He was operating as kind of the deep threat. And I thought he was a really good prospect. I think he was a better prospect than Zay. They're both first round picks. He had the better profile, I think. Zay's kind of interesting because like he could be kind of like a target earner, just someone who gets open really well in the intermediate area. But I don't know. I mean, I'm getting a guy who's already shown like strong hints of high-end talent last year, coming off a foot injury, but the veteran who should hit the ground running a little bit more than Zay. And you're getting him generally after Zay Jones. So to me, it's kind of like, I know we took him over Zay Jones here, but I think he should be ahead of Zay Jones. And
I think you need to adjust your ranks then, because I'm pretty sure you have Zay ahead of him.
Well, the ADP is Zay.
That's what's
yeah. I think you want to get both. I think you want to have some of both. Zay Jones comp to guys like Kendall Wright for me in my pre-draft stuff, and I'm like, Kendall Wright, you think of as a bust, but he did have a 1,000-yard season early on. Michael Floyd was another guy who came up, although he's bigger. It's not the same archetype, but like one of these 4-year guys who eventually didn't really turn into anything, but was productive early on. I think Zay's probably like pretty ready to go for a rookie. So yeah, I think both guys are pretty solid picks, but like in this situation, Bateman makes like way more sense for our team, right? We have Jaxson Smith-Njigba. He's going to come on slow. We only have 2 other wide receivers. Like, I don't feel like waiting around for Zay Flowers.
Yes, Bonesaw, we're talking about Zay Flowers. Copper Prices in the 12 hole was having so much fun in this draft and now has moved on to I hate this after taking James Conner and Jamison Williams. Really just stole our week 17 Philadelphia bring back with James Conner. Come on, Copper, you're killing us.
Yeah. You got to bring back the 28-year-old running back in week 17, which I have done. Of course.
So we are about to be on the clock at pick 92. Definitely a ton of running backs that look like the best values. The best wide receivers on the board by ADP would be Juju and Alan Lazard and Odell Beckham. So
yeah, that's over.
Very gross there. Nothing at tight end, I think. So, I mean, I think we're at a running back pick here. We do have Madison sliding 10 picks past ADP is kind of interesting to me, as well as Rachaad White. I'd be good with either of those guys.
I like Rachaad White. I've been battling Sam Sherman in the DMs on Rachaad White. He's just absolutely hates the fact that he wasn't an efficient rusher as a rookie. But reports that Sean Tucker not practicing right now because of the heart thing. He's not cleared to practice.
Mm-hmm.
So, and Chase Edmonds not practicing. I'm not sure why. So you're looking at a backfield that right now is Rachaad White, Keyshawn Vaughn, and Patrick Laird. And
put some respect on my boy's name.
Yeah. So like, okay, White, they're saying he's the lead back. They're changing the rushing system to a zone scheme. So maybe that suits White better. They think it will. And he's up to 220 pounds. So I don't think they're going to be worried about him around the goal line. Look, he probably sucks as a rusher, but it's like that we normally don't pay eighth round prices for, a 220 pound running back with receiving ability who's going to be the clear lead back. That's like normally you have to pay like a 4th or 5th round tag for that. I just think it's a different bet.
Yeah. And I mean, to me, I'm not getting excited about Rachaad White because of the rushing.
No, he just needs to hold guys off and get enough work there.
If he's the pass catcher and the goal line back, we can live without him ripping off 35-yard, runs.
Yeah, he won't do that. That's not really him.
All right, we're back on the clock again. Still extremely gross at wide receiver. I don't see anything we need to do at quarterback. This seems like a running back pick to me, unless you're seeing anything else. Njoku, I guess, is there at ADP, but
no, I like Charbonnet a lot.
Yep.
Another guy who could be the passing down back right away. And then are we sure he's not the goal line back by the end of the year? He's pretty big. Walker's got stuffed a lot.
I'm almost treating this Seahawks backfield like I did last year. And granted, the prices are much different. You were getting last year, like 10th round Walker and 12th round Penny. And this year it's, 10th round Charbonnet and 5th round Walker. But I like taking both of these guys at ADP and just knowing, one, they're both going to probably have standalone value, obviously Walker, but I think Charbonnet too. And then the contingent upside. We already know what the contingent upside looks like. We saw it last year with Kenneth Walker. You're going to get like a round 2 value if one of these guys get the backfield to themselves. And then for this specific team, we already have a bet on JSN. So kind of building out that bet on the Seahawks. I think it made a ton of sense here.
Yeah, sometimes like making the same bet that's worked before feels like a real fish move. But like I've had success with this in DFS where like I think the first time I won a GPP, I believe Leone had just done like a Watson double stack or something. And I then won the following week with a Watson double stack. I'm like, you can just like be like, yeah, Watson double stacks, they win you money. And then they win you, so it's like, to me, like we don't normally get like the exact same bet on the same team at the same price 2 years in a row, but like
right.
Talented 2nd round rookie, in like a 9th round price tag, you're getting contingent value. You're getting potential standalone value. I mean, I think they're going to have a committee. They say they're going to have a committee.
Yeah.
Pete Carroll called Kenneth Walker after to be like, we still like you, buddy.
Yeah.
I mean,
And if you think about Zach Charbonnet, if you want to be like uncharitable and call him like a fancy Alexander Madison, and he's going maybe 2.5 rounds ahead of where Alexander Madison went in the olden days, and where it's like Kenneth Walker gets dinged up for 2 to 3 games, and Charbonnet gives you 20 plus touches in those games, and one of those comes in the fantasy playoffs, like he can pay off that price tag. And so that's like in some of the like lower outcome scenarios. And I think there's room for so much more on top of that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do think that, like, look, he's not going to take over the backfield like completely, but I do think there's something to the idea that Kenneth Walker was getting stuffed a lot and he doesn't catch passes. So, like, if we're talking high value touches, like who gets the most high value touches? I mean, we're paying a big premium. There's a lot of confidence that, it's Walker. It's definitely Walker. Like it could be Charbonnet. Charbonnet could be the guy who has more of the high value stuff.
Yeah. And I think I'm okay playing those arguments both ways. I could say, Charbonnet, maybe he's buried. Maybe he makes some mistakes and the teams lose confidence in him, and Walker's getting 80% of the touches. And that's why I think both of their ADPs kind of account for those various scenarios. And I want to grab Walker when he's a value, and I want to grab Charbonnet. His ADP is kind of stuck in the mud right now in a good way. We are back on the clock here. We want to be done with quarterback. We could do the Geno thing. We could build out our Eagles bet with Penny. What are you seeing? I mean, wide receiver is still pretty gross.
I think I'd rather go running back and punt quarterback too a little bit.
Do you want to go Giga stack with Penny?
Yeah.
All right. So for the audio listeners now, through 10 rounds,
I need to lower Kamara more. You just can't lower him.
You just can't get him low enough. Jalen Hurts at quarterback, CMC, Rachaad White, Zach Charbonnet, and Rashad Penny at running back. I mean, this is still probably a 5 running back team, but I think if you had some balls, you could threaten to be done at 4. Wide receiver, Devonta Smith, Drake London, JSN, Rashod Bateman, tight end, Dallas Goedert. So we're going to have to get creative with some wide receivers here in these double-digit rounds.
What are we looking at stack-wise right now for a second quarterback?
So Geno goes off the board, so that's gone. You got a late Desmond Ridder, and that is it. So some backdoor stacks would be nice to set up here.
Okay. All right. We can't do Stafford, right? Because Stafford and Hurts have the same bye, I think.
Let's see. Week 10, yeah, good call. Yesterday on Splash Play, I almost selected 3 quarterbacks with a week 9 bye. And I would have just absolutely heard it from bye week Twitter in that case. The trifecta there. Reminder, Pat and I and Ben Gretsch will be drafting on Ship Chasing tonight. That is on a separate YouTube channel, link down below. We do that show every single Wednesday night at 9:15 p.m. Eastern, and we are going to fire up some drafts tonight. So you can tune in for that, and we will have lots of fun as always. Let's see here. So we're about to be on the clock. I was really hoping Mingo was going to fall there. We might just have to.
Nico.
Do you want to do it? What?
I would do Nico.
What about? I'm just going to throw it out there for week 17, the Mooney Drake London thing.
Yeah, I guess I'm open to that. Nico gives us a backdoor stack option, which is why.
Yeah, I guess the only thought was you are higher in your ranks than ADP on him, maybe playing the ADP game. And then the fact that we had the week 17, I was like, do we just want to play it ADP wise there? But
yeah, that makes sense.
It could backfire.
Mooney can play. Mooney's like a reliable veteran.
Mm-hmm. He's
got his routes. We know he's got his routes.
And if you
There's also other ways to backdoor the Texans if you want to.
True. Yeah, there's still, there's still plenty of teams with backdoor options. And when you have Hurts, you really do kind of have a permission to really push it where I'm not like sweating who's going to be our QB2.
Yeah. You mentioned that, putting these strategies together is something I've been focusing on. And that's I'm working on an article now I'm working on like 4 articles. That's why I haven't published anything recently, because I'm trying to get all of
You're
these
trying to
done.
put your article structure pieces together like we do
Yeah,
on draft.
it's kind of like the Mr. Burns thing, where like all the germs got stuck in the doorway frame and none of them can get in, from The Simpsons. The reference you clearly don't know. That's how my writing right now is going. There's like 5 articles and they're all jammed together, but one of them is looking at the quarterback landscape, and it's I think kind of interesting to look at pairing like hero running back or zero running back with an elite quarterback, where you punt the quarterback 2, because normally you're going to get your quarterback 2 in the same range where we're taking Zach Charbonnet, Penny. I mean, we had the choice, right, to go with Geno Smith or Rashad Penny, and you have an opportunity to kind of bolster the running back position. You're punting quarterback 2. That's been a bad strategy, but it's been an okay strategy when paired with an elite quarterback. So you're getting access to this thing that's like not good, but it does free you up if you can punt quarterback 2, and elite quarterback seems to allow you to get away with a suboptimal tactic under normal conditions, and then you get to do something else that is optimal, getting these running backs in this pocket of the draft where they're really good picks. So it's something I'm thinking about as we try to figure out what to do with these elevated quarterback prices. It's like, well,
Right.
if we're giving up opportunity cost by taking these quarterbacks that high, even if you get them in the 3rd, I mean, it's still a lot to pay. Maybe there's something we can gain back later.
Yeah, where you're thinking about your overall draft capital spent on the position, and that 2nd round pick. Like if you're thinking about it on that like auction dollar exponential curve, it is significantly more than even taking a quarterback in back-to-back in the 5th and 6th round. That 2nd round pick is worth so much.
It's worth a ton.
All right, let's see what we got on the board here. My God. This is one of the grossest wide receiver boards I have seen in a while.
Did
I
Rondale
wouldn't
go?
even. What?
I know he goes way later. Did Rondale go?
Dude, I think he did. Holy shit.
Jesus.
Unless he's buried. Pat, what do you think about taking Kendre Miller and being done at running back?
Works for me.
I'm just trying to see if there's anything else here, but if the room's going to give us Kendre at 140, I can't stomach taking, Adam Thielen and just all, because now we are in just the full on YOLO, Van Jefferson, MBS, DPJ, Osborne tier. It got gross fast.
Yeah, we're going to be living in that tier anyway, but
I just need to do it. I mean, I'm sucking air right now. All right, we are back on the
9th. Rondale in the 9th.
Pat, I think we just got to rip my, 20th share of Marvin Mims here, unless you see anything else.
Fine with me.
Trying to see anything else there. I mean, it's getting dire out here. We now have a 1-5-6-1 build. Jalen Hurts at quarterback and Goddard at tight end. We're done at running back with CMC, Rachaad White, Zach Charbonnet, Rashad Penny, Kendre Miller. Wide receivers, Devonta Smith, Drake London, JSN, Rashod Bateman, Darnell Mooney, Marvin Mims. We've yet to capitulate on, like, I guess you could argue, maybe some people would say Mims is like a gross pick at 150. I don't really think so, but we have not capitulated on like a really gross RB reach or wide receiver reach yet. We've kind of thumbed our nose at the Avalanche.
No, we play. I think we stayed ahead of it, but barely. We got our 5th wide receiver in round 11, which is like a little behind schedule, but not egregious. And it's a veteran, obviously low volume passing offense, but he's got his routes. He's got his routes, right? No one's challenging him. So yeah, it's definitely a little thin at wide receiver, but we're like super strong at running back. I mean, this is about as strong at running back as I ever am.
Yeah. 10 minutes says CMC in a piss boy room feels bad. here's one thing about this too is, first of all, you never know if it's a true piss boy room or not. You can like guess, and sometimes these rooms break and it's like, oh no, this is actually fairly average. Sometimes they go full on piss boy. The other thing I will say, if I'm going to play counter to this, is you start to get very unique combinations of your running back room that a lot of other people won't have access to when you're getting all of these guys past ADP, Rachaad White past ADP, Kendry Miller past ADP. So it does open you up to some unique rooms.
I love a running back room. I mean, CMC,
it's a nice room
with 2 rookies, and then you get the Rachaad White takes over the backfield play, is just a solid RB2 all year. Penny becomes this like luxury dude where it's like just spike a few times, and hopefully in the playoffs, but even during the regular season would be fine because we have 2 rookies paired with him. Kendry Miller gives you a little bit of the early season, hopefully with Kamara suspended, and maybe late season as a rookie. So it's a fun room. You could see it working, like everyone can work together in that room.
So I would float Tyquan Thornton right now as a backdoor stack.
I like the Jefferson or Hodgins plays a little more, especially getting a huge ADP value.
We can do Jefferson. We just can't do Stafford with that double.
We can't do Stafford, yeah. But I think like given how we're a little bit thin at wide receiver, getting the veteran at an ADP discount, I think makes a lot of sense.
Here's the thing I would say to you guys. CMC isn't bad. Taking 4 running backs in 10 rounds with CMC seems like it though. You guys tell me which pick you would have done differently and which wide receiver you would have taken instead of the running back. Because it's really easy to just look at the board and say, structurally, I wish we had another wide receiver. But tell me which wide receiver you would have taken over which running back, and then I can laugh at you for how bad of a pick it would be to take that wide receiver over the running back.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's the thing too. Like the other thing is that like 4 running backs through 10 rounds, well, there's a number of ways you can get there. The fact that we didn't take a running back until round 8, right? RB2's round 8, and then we went 8, 9, 10. Like, yeah, we had 4 through 10, but we took 1 through 7 as well. So I think we did use CMC to help us get through those early rounds and do other stuff, including taking 4 wide receivers. So it's not like we wasted CMC in my mind. I mean, we played the room.
Yeah. And I think it's not the running back picks. I agree with Nate. It was the elite tight end pick. The Goddard pick took away, I don't know the board, but a Traylon Burks type that we would normally get there.
Yeah, that's fair.
I know you liked Hodgins, but I do think for setting up the stack, Tyquan Thornton, or is there something else you're seeing here?
No, I'd be down with Thornton here.
I mean, I obviously like Thornton. I'm over 20%. Here. That gets us to 8 wide receivers.
20% is a me 40%, just so you guys know.
Yeah. I do think too, this is something that happens in the wide receiver avalanche rooms where eventually the people who have been hammering wide receiver, they have to take their feet off the gas because they have to address other positions. And then you get Van Jefferson past ADP. You get, some picks that start to like get closer to the equilibrium. Like you're not just hammering guys way ahead of ADP the entire draft.
Yeah. Let's see with Goddard. Oh, good.
Yeah. So the Goddard pick would have been it was Traylon Burks, George Pickens, Jahan Dotson. That was the real, but man, it seems like such a mistake to pass up on a 3rd round Hurts double stack with one of his top 3 options. I'm willing to make that trade-off.
And I think Goddard's like a 5th round value, like just like normally. So to get him stacked with Hurts, you're pushing it at wide receiver for sure. But then you have to reach for Bateman in the 7th. So like I get it. I get the criticisms of it. And I guess what you could say is like in this room, we knew we were going to be doing something like reaching for Bateman in the 7th. So maybe you do pass up on Goddard in this room. I will say, I think we all agree we wish we had another wide receiver or 2 early. I also will say one of the things about being very comfortable with the full draft board and reverse engineering your draft is knowing where some of these other guys you like. I mean, I just took my 2 highest
exposure wide receivers in this draft, Marvin Mims and Tyquan Thornton. I think those guys are underpriced. You could argue where we took them is maybe fair value or whatever, but knowing that you have a green light to push certain structures that you wouldn't normally do, because we are drafting Marvin Mims like he's a 9th round value. We're drafting Tyquan Thornton as if he's a 12th round value. If you're right on that, then the structure completely opens up, right? Like that's the thesis of taking those guys there, is like they're going to massively outperform their cost.
Yeah. Plus, I mean, we're a little boxed out, but we're not fully boxed out. We had
you want to talk me into a Taysom Hill, Rachaad White mini, our tight end 2 here, Taysom Hill.
I mean, Taysom Hill would be a great pick here. I don't know why you're so out on him.
I'm telling you, I'm much more in at these prices. We're now at pick 188. He was going at pick 140, 150 earlier in the draft season. I finally fudded Taysom Hill down to prices where it's more palatable for me.
Yeah, I like now that probably the only issue with that is we're probably locked out of a Arizona bringback now, because the tight ends are kind of your last.
That is, unless I don't mind a little Greg Dortch in my life. Honestly.
Okay. Yeah.
Who would you, because I think there's 3 flyers that we could do as far as correlation. You could do, as Chris G suggested in the chat earlier, you got your classic Quez Watkins. You even have your Olamide Zaccheaus, if that's your flavor. And then you also have like the Greg Dortch. I'm guessing we go with a correlation for one of those wide receivers. And then this pick here is likely Matt Jones. Pat, if you want to sell me, I'm all over the place here, but at pick 17.5, if you want to sell me on Matthew Stafford, 40 some picks past ADP, I will go to battle with the bye week bros. If you want to sell
really, we're going to battle with bye week bros. Okay, let's do it. Let's thumb our noses at the bye week bros.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm excited.
If we're gonna make up some ADP value on some of these reaches we had to do, getting Matthew Stafford, 40 picks past ADP seems like a good way to do it. Here you go, bye week, bro. For the audio listeners, we just took Jalen Hurts and Matthew Stafford. Pat, what? Oh my God, I just noticed.
Oh no, they have the same bye, dude.
Both in way. Oh my God, we just sacrificed a 0.04% advancement rate equity from this. Oh no.
But dude, I mean, the advance rate bros are in shambles because we also got like 40 picks of ADP value, so they don't know what to think. They don't know what to do. Is it good or is it bad? Get your calculators out.
Oh, is it good or bad?
Oh shit. I would say that the bye week bros are a much louder cohort than the ADP value guys. The ADP value guys are over the corner going, "Ooh," and the bye week guys are with their pitchforks and their tiki torches just stampeding the streets.
But my point is, every ADP bro is also a bye week bro, right? If you want to advance, get your advance rates together, you got to watch your bye weeks too.
Oh my goodness. So now this does also open up to us. So look at these 3 at the top of the queue, Pat. Dortch, Quez Watkins, and Tutu. You can make a case for any of those 3 on this team. What a time to be alive.
Stack Stafford in the 17th. I like it.
Yeah, I know. We could get because we got the double stack with Hurts, obviously. We have the single right now with Stafford.
No one's going to buy this argument because Stafford and Hurts have the same buy. But let's pretend they don't. Let's just pretend they don't for this 1 second.
Yeah.
Like, how much better is Stafford in the late rounds? Or how much worse is Stafford of a pick, than Geno Smith, really? And we're getting a single stack with Stafford versus the single stack we passed up with Geno Smith. And I think we're getting a lot more ceiling with Rashad Penny than we would have, Kenneth Gainwell would have been. It's sort of a Kenneth Gainwell, Geno Smith versus Rashad Penny, Matthew Stafford CV2.
Let's have this conversation because I think I disagree with the chat on this. The chat wants the week 17 Slayton bring back. And I do like Slayton. Is Slayton already gone? I think Slayton's gone. Is he? But
no.
Hang on. Let's make this pick and then let's talk about what would you actually rather have, a double stack with your quarterback or a week 17 bring back in a single stack? Quez, Tutu, Puka. What do you
think
like?
Quez. I think we bet on the Eagles. Like the Eagles is the thing we did. I mean, Michael Wilson would be the other if you want to get weird and do a bring back on the Cardinals. Probably have to type him in. Yeah. I would bet on the game we're betting on.
let's get weird because we've already kind of overstacked the Eagles. Maybe not. I mean, 4 players. Let's get a guy we haven't taken. Michael Wilson.
Penny isn't part of it, right? Penny's to help get us there. And we've basically burned that pick for the week 17 game. But that's okay because we also have CMC, Rachaad White, 2 rookies. So like we kind of know that Penny's not hitting our week 17 lineup.
Yeah.
But then it's really just a double stack. It's Smith and Goddard. So I would be okay tacking on Quez to that. But I kind of like the Michael Wilson bring back.
Who's out here taking Greg Dortch with no single correlations? I mean, getting sniped on Greg Dortch is this draft in a microcosm. But let's talk about that because the chat's having this debate. Like, I think if I was drafting this team on my own, I think I would have tacked on a Rams wide receiver. I completely understand what you're saying, but I guess we're in agreement about like the bet on the Eagles. But the thing I want to talk about is people love their mini correlations and their bring back so much. I think they are forgetting that if you go look at your correlation charts, the pass catcher with their quarterback is a much stronger correlation than oppo player to your quarterback stack. And I get it. I love mini correlations. They're fun. But do you think we've jumped the shark wanting to prioritize a bring back over just correlating the players we already have on the team?
I don't think you've jumped the shark if it's a Cardinals bring back on a Jalen Hurts, Dallas Goedert, Devonta Smith, Rashad Penny team. Because you're like, the Eagles are what got you there. The Eagles need to go off in week 17. Like if Devonta Smith, Jalen Hurts don't go off, like we lose. Like we're not winning with Stafford, given what we spent on Smith and Hurts in week 17. Like, I guess I don't want to say he's like completely dead, but it's not very likely. So it's like, you want to build teams that have multiple outs to getting you there in the championship game, but like we didn't do that good of a job of building our first out. You know, like our first out is the Eagles and the Cardinals. I guess you could argue, hey, the Eagles are going to crush the Cardinals, but that's not ideal because we need Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith to go off. So, like if it's just Penny needs to put up like 40. And then Stafford, because like Stafford to Van Jefferson is not like a super high upside stack. So I think like the way we built the team, we kind of already made a huge bet on the Eagles in week 17 specifically. And so we should continue making that bet until that bet has been made. And we didn't really finish making it until that 18th round pick. So my second choice would be to stack with the quarterback, either Quez or Tutu. My third choice would be a bring back on kind of a half built out Rams thing that, you know, you don't even have Stafford double stacked. So I would say the priority is getting a second stacking option with Stafford before you start bringing anybody back there.
Yeah. A couple comments in the chat, people saying all this guy stinks. This guy stinks. Newsflash, guys. Every 18th round pick stinks. It's why they're going in the 18th round.
Does Tutu stink? I think Tutu's kind of good. I actually think Tutu's like good. He's just so small.
He is. He's very, you know, you could draft you can get your all late small team. You get your Bryce Young, you get your Greg Dortch, your Tutu, Deuce Vaughn, toss him in.
Can
there.
I help up Michael Wilson a little bit here?
Yeah, hype up Michael Wilson. Hang on. I just want to say one more thing on the correlation point. This happens in DFS too. This is the one thing. Like, obviously, in our perfect world, we get like that Ravens-Dolphins game from early last season where it goes bonkers and there's points everywhere. But you actually have 2 outs to just team level correlations because you have the blowout out as well, right? Where let's just say the team scores 40 and the other team scores 3 points. That correlation block still hits for you when the bring back can fail. Like your team can access a high point ceiling even without getting pushed in some scenarios. And so I think sometimes we get too caught up on wanting the shootout, but it's like you can also just play it as that one offense going off and you're getting all the benefits of stacking up that team. But talk to me about Michael Wilson because now we need the Cardinals to go off on the bring back here.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I'm probably being too precise to say that Hurts and Penny couldn't get there together in week 17. Like given what we paid for Penny, like they totally could. If Penny scores 20 points in week 17, that's a big win for us. And Hurts, you know, they could just roll the Cardinals. And Hurts could have a huge game as well. So It's a good point. You don't always need to be thinking bring back. Stacking is more important than bringing back. Michael Wilson, 3rd round pick. I'm convinced that we don't care about Michael Wilson because he wasn't included in the big board. I think that meaningfully hurt our perception on Michael Wilson. He crushed the combine. He had a 37.5-inch vertical, 125-inch broad jump. He's 6'2", 213. He didn't really, his college production and stuff kind of sucks. 4.58 40, but a really good 10-yard split. So he's just like a very athletic guy with size, pretty big hands as well. And new coaching staff, and they spent a 3rd round pick on him. So he could, like, by the end of the year have like a role, and he's kind of more of like a deep threat dude. Like, he can get there quickly. So I don't know. I haven't really drafted him much. That might be my first share. So I don't want to act like I'm super high on him, but I kind of like it as like a not drafted bring back,
Yeah. And we all love this narrative of the Cardinals implosion, right? Kyler gets benched. Nuke's already long gone. Maybe Rondale Moore's a little banged up. And it's just like, we're going to YOLO it with the young guys here. And you're down 40 against the Cardinal or against the Eagles. I can tell myself that story there.
Who's more likely to play on the outside by the end of the year? Like Greg Dortch, Rondale Moore, or a huge athletic guy that they just drafted in the 3rd round? Like,
all right, guys, what I just heard was get your Michael Wilson now because he's going to be a 16th round pick in a couple of weeks. So go.
I mean, he's sort of like Mike. He's the same. He's pretty similar bet to like Cedric Tillman, right? But
right.
Like, Tillman's always drafted and Wilson's like not really drafted that much. So
yeah, exactly here. So I'll do a final recap here for the audio listeners. This is my 32nd draft, Best Ball Mania draft. I'll be drafting number 33 in just a few minutes here with Rotoviz's Shawn Siegele. And then I'll be drafting number 34 tonight with Kerrane, with Ben Gretsch on Ship Chasing. Hey, note to self, Pat, let's not get buried by an avalanche tonight. Can we make that note to ourselves?
Yeah. Yeah.
So here's this team right here. Jalen Hurts and Matthew Stafford, the dreaded, the unforgivable, the egregious double bye week at quarterback, 2 week 10 buys here. Running back, Christian McCaffrey, Rachaad White, Zach Charbonnet, Rashod Penny, and Kendre Miller. Wide receivers, Devonta Smith, Drake London, JSN, Rashod Bateman, Darnell Mooney, Marvin Mims, Van Jefferson, Tyquan Thornton, and the Galbrain Week 17 bring back Michael Wilson. Tight ends, Dallas Goedert and Taysom Hill. I do think the big decision point of this draft was not the extra running back. I did see in the chat, taking Mingo or Rashee Rice over Rashod Penny. I think the big decision point was the Dallas Goedert versus Treylon Burks, George Pickens. That was really where this draft hinged at, I think.
I think we recovered fine. I mean, you get a Van Jefferson at pick 164 past ADP. I mean, I have him ahead of ADP. ETR is super high on Van Jefferson. You're getting like projectable, like wide receiver routes and targets out of Van Jefferson. No one really can come for his routes. Like he's the guy there. It's like kind of the number 2 guy. So I feel pretty good. Like Smith-Njigba, Mims, Wilson. Hopefully we get some of those guys at the end of the year. Tyquan Thornton, 2nd-year guy. Like I know it's not the sexiest wide receiver room ever, and we had to reach on Bateman, and Mooney's not an ideal wide receiver 5, but like I don't know. I think we're in decent shape.
We do have kind of a nice mix here too of, real big breakout potential guys as well, who could kind of help us recover a little bit there. I do like how this team turned out. Pat,
let's get us to that bye week. Do we have enough week 10 production? Because we're not getting any quarterback points.
Yeah. We're going to need Taysom Hill to have
Taysom Hill, baby. Who do they play?
If you could have your 1.5 big games that you do every year, one of those come in week 10. I would really.
We need Taysom Hill actually playing quarterback. He played the Vikings. That seems good. The Vikings, right?
Pat, where those of you guys, we were drafting in here off of Pat's ranks, which you can get at legendaryupside.com. Super simple CSV download, upload to Underdog. Pat, do you still got some Underdog credits floating around as well?
I do. Yeah, you can get a $50 Underdog credit if you sign up at legendaryupside.com/early. That'll also get you $30 off your first year. And then you got to fill out a form that will give me your username, details on that on the site. And once I have your username, I'll send that over to Underdog. I'm actually going to send over a batch today. So if you sign up today, it'll probably be about a week, unless you sign up right now. If you sign up right now, because I haven't sent it over yet, you can get your Underdog credit like very quickly. Once I have your username, that'll lock in the credit. And I have a limited amount of those. They are going pretty quick. I think I would say by the end of June, though, they'll be gone. So recommend signing up soon if you're going to do it. I got rankings, as I mentioned, working on a bunch of articles. Already have some good strategy pieces on best ball up there now.
There you go. Two things that are going to be gone by the end of June: leg up credits and 18th round Michael Wilson. So load up now before they're all gone. Appreciate, as always, drafting with Pat Kerrane. This is going to be a weekly staple on the channel, double headers every single Wednesday, and actually a triple header if you think about it, because you get Pat and I on ship chasing tonight with Ben Gretsch. So tune in for that. I'm going to say bye to Pat, and Shawn Siegele is going to join us here in a second for the Best Ball Banana Stand. Have a good one, Pat.
Later, man.
All right, Shawn Siegele, we are back for another draft. This is, of course, Best Ball Banana Stand. You might be watching this on my YouTube channel. You might be listening to this on the Rotoviz airwaves. It is a show where Shawn and I draft a Best Ball Mania 4 team. We talk through all of our strategy, the new ADP landscape, various things you guys can exploit in your drafts. Shawn, how are you feeling after a long Memorial Day weekend?
Good. And I love the intro image there. Colin Kelly was working with you on some of this. He's the producer for us over at OT and with the RV Radio Productions. And his thumbnails for our YouTube videos are pretty hilarious, because they're either me looking up at the sky like I'm trying to remember something that I will never remember again, or like they're mouth wide open. It's perfect. It's perfect. And all the bananas in the background. I love it.
There is, I did ask producer Colin for some photos of you for thumbnails, and I was going through the folder there, and I noticed one of you with just long flowing locks. It looked like you were maybe at like the Grand Canyon or Bryce Canyon, something like that. And I also seem to notice, is that your Slack profile picture as well?
There's another one from a long time ago in New York there in the Slack one. The one that was one actually sent to Mike Clay a long time ago for something that he was putting together, and my email message was, this isn't what you want, but this is what I've got. And obviously it wasn't what he wanted, but yeah, I think that was on top of a volcano, and like I didn't hike up it or anything, just, tour group going up there. But yeah, that was a fun day.
There you go. Since we last talked, I know last week we were referencing a big underdog strategy piece you were going to have up on the site that did publish over the weekend. What can people find in there if they check that out? Because you were kind of doing an exploration on elite QBs.
Right. And elite QB is pretty controversial. It'll be interesting to see where we end up going with these QB ADPs. I was in a draft last night where I went ahead and took Josh Allen like mid to late third, even though it didn't really fit what I kind of thought that I was going to do. But I wanted to have at least one of those picks in there in case the ADPs don't drop. Now, what we saw last year and what we tend to see is that they're going to get a little bit less expensive as people get more comfortable with some other early picks there. But Michael Dubner has a great piece up on the site going through some of the strengths and weaknesses, what we might be looking at this year. I am a big QB window believer, and I'm a big 2 QB in the window believer, and tend to be 2 QBs overall. We're going to talk about some areas where I think that you might really want to deviate from that in a variety of situations this year. But if you reach up out of the window, I think because of the direction the NFL is going, and obviously you've got these 3 super teams that people are really trying to play those teams. I think if you're trying to play those teams, you really have to lean into that. And you have to go for not just that week 17 stack, but you've got to look for a full week 16 game stacked type of situation. And then there are some other elements as well. So 5 components to make your elite QB team work. And again, that's to work for the regular season, to work for week 16 advance, so we get as many teams into the finals as possible, and then work for the big week there, try to win the $3 million.
You referenced the QB window. Longtime Rotoviz subscribers will know what you mean by that. But for people who aren't familiar, how do you define, or how should people be thinking about the quarterback window?
It's going to depend on the year, as the ADP is going to shift around for that entire position. But generally speaking, we're looking at, really that kind of round 8 to round 13-ish type of area. And you're not going to get the top 5 or 6 QBs, but you're looking at that, tier 2 or maybe even tier 3, you might say, through approximately QB 16. And one of the things that we got last year, and it was a little bit different last year as the QB window kind of moved up a little bit in price, is that you were getting guys like Hurts, especially before the very end, when it became quite obvious that Hurts was going to be somebody that people wanted and was going to score, which he did. Joe Burrow, and then toward the end of the window, you get guys like Justin Fields and Trevor Lawrence. So that part, again, actually worked really well last year, even in a season where you go through, you pull up the Rotoviz Advanced Rate Explorer, and you can see that these elite QBs, more or less destroy the world, which is why people are reaching earlier for them and want to build their teams around them. So, you have that tension now of how much are we chasing last year's production, or how much is this really a sea change? And we have to be involved on those players. One of the things that happened last year, and Michael discussed this in his article, but the elite QB scoring was then also amplified by just this incredible rash of injuries across the guys in the window. And so if you don't have all of that other QB production, if you have elite QB going against teams that maybe don't have hardly anything, then, it's difficult to overcome that advantage. Whether or not that advantage will exist again in 2023 is very much up for debate. But even last year, when we had all of those things working against it, you did have a handful of quarterbacks and some of the key targets as being players who were very successful. So we have to work through that. But Pete, I also don't think the QB window is as strong this year. This might be the weakest year in memory for the QB window.
Right, because so many other of the guys who had traditionally fallen there have gotten pushed up outside of it. And now the available player pool is just not as strong there. But yeah, excited to talk about QBs throughout the offseason. We are underway here in our Best Ball Mania 4 draft. We did draw the 102. Our guy Chipsy from the 1 is starting to have a little fun here. Galaxy braining AJ Brown at the 101. What would you like to do here? Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, the top prizes. Anything jump out to you?
I'm good to go with Jefferson. I have done some Chase teams, and Chase gives you a lot of things you can do that are fun, but I'm guessing that at the end of the season, together and then separately, we'll end up with a lot more Bengals than we do Vikings for a variety of reasons. Kind of fun to get a Vikings team here early on.
Yeah, especially from the 1-2, you get a little excited. All right, maybe I get a slightly different pocket of the draft board, getting in from the 2 than you do at the turn. I did notice, just again, one of the things funny, just having my exposures up, just incidentally, I only have 3.4% Chase. I've had some 101s, had a lot of 104, 105s. And because I've been taking Jefferson ahead of Chase, I'm a little below on Chase where I'd like to be. But I think as the summer progresses, that will certainly even out, because I do not want to be in the business of accidentally fading Jamar Chase.
No. And with Burrow being, Burrow is the easiest way to play these elite QBs. He didn't score at the level of obviously those 3 top guys last season. And when you pull up the Stack Explorer portion of the Advanced Rate Explorer, you can see how the stack with Burrow and guys like Chase and Higgins was not nearly as dynamic. It basically didn't work at all compared to the top 3 guys. But if you think about going forward, what are we likely to see as the next big thing? The next big thing, there's a really good chance that it will be Burrow with those guys. He just needs his receivers to stay healthy, and he has that chance to be. So much of the discussion around the AFC Championship game time period last year was, has Burrow gone beyond Patrick Mahomes? Obviously, that portion of it is silly, but if you're talking about a guy who could jump up into that range in fantasy and be a dynamic scorer, that one guy who might be like mildly discounted, and you have him. But I do think that the portion with those other three guys that is so interesting is that once Amon-Ra is gone, I mean, you could make an argument that round 2 is flat. I mean, to say that round 2 that early on in the draft, that maybe you don't have a guy, I mean, that part is tough. But with drafters adjusting and going after these receivers, we do have an element there where, I mean, you in the back half of round 2, you've got some interesting choices.
For sure. And I did just get your Rotoviz rankings loaded into the applet. In our first draft, we drafted off of Pat's legendary upside rankings. And I believe this is still a hybrid blend from the Shawn rankings and the Michael Dubner. Is that correct?
And Michael just updated his, so.
Awesome. And is that, well, we both love Michael Dubner, but is this just like, do we call this a Shawn Siegele sanity check, where it's just like some of your rankings are just too hot to touch for casual viewers and listeners, that you need Dubner to come in and kind of, chill things out a little bit?
I think that's a very good way to put it.
Well, excited to draft there. And I am going to make a concerted effort. I am trying to, for the audio listeners, let you guys know what the board looks like. The options are available, but I also want to make sure I'm not leading Shawn. Sometimes I naturally will say like, oh, these are the top picks available. Today, Shawn, I'm going to be more intentional about letting you look at the draft board and you getting the first words out about what you would like to do, because part of doing this and what's fun for me is getting the full Shawn experience. I don't want to just draft the same teams I would draft otherwise. So as we come up here on the 2-3 turn, all the top quarterbacks are still on the board. A couple running backs, Breece Hall, Tony Pollard, and Ramondre, and wide receiver T. Higgins. T. Higgins comes off the board there. So the next available wide receiver, you're down in that Debo, Keenan Allen range. About to be up on the board here. What do you like?
One of the things that we see when we pull up the Win the Flex tool, which is a Blair Andrews special, is that running backs give you a lot more implied points by ADP. So with the wide receivers wiped out, you do have to look here, especially since we didn't take Chase. You have to look here at, going with a couple of running backs, right? So we went Hall last time. Do you like Stevenson? Do you want to go with double Hall to start?
Let's mix it up. You mentioned Stevenson? I'll sneak that one in there. You mentioned Stevenson over Pollard. Are you in the ranks? It seems like they're all obviously close. Are you Stevenson over Pollard though?
I am. I had an interesting discussion with Connor O'Driscoll last night talking about Pollard as a guy who, he's not going to fall into all of the work that Elliott gives up. And so from that perspective, I don't think that he has the same upside, even though we love his profile. He's the kind of guy who, a 0 RB, perfect selection for years and years and years and years.
Do you want to go 2 running backs here with Breece and Ramondre, or go Josh Allen?
Let's see where the quarterbacks end up falling in this draft. Go with a couple of the running backs here. One of the things in looking at the board overall, and it is that weakness that you run into at the 101 and the 102, and there are a ton of strengths, and so you certainly can't complain anytime that you get one of those 2 picks. You definitely can't complain in a situation here where you're able to get Jefferson. You see here the drafter who takes AJ Brown at the 101 does go back in there with Hurts, but there's a chance that T. Higgins will go in front of you. I think that after Higgins, you have this massive tier break. When I'm looking at the first 7 rounds, I think that you have to get 5 wide receivers as many times as is humanly possible. And you have to go wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. And then round 3 is a very clear running back round, because you still have some very fun names available and you don't have the receivers. And then you've got to get back onto the receivers 4 through 7. Again, those almost have to be receiver picks. And then round 8, you're looking at the potential for a guy to slide to you. But Pete, the thing that I was going to mention that I do think is interesting and is very relevant now with what happened to us in this board is that when you pull up the Win the Flex tool, which uses ADP and historical ADP and results to give you implied points. And so you can see that if the future resembled what we've seen, and you can pick out the years that you want to work with. You can look at just 2022 if you want. You can look at the last couple of years. You can pull up a different format to see how the shape of scoring has gone over a longer period of time. That's something you and I talked about kind of in a different context last week. But you can look at that and see how the positions are scoring relative to each other. And you do find that, once you get into that kind of middle of the second round area, running backs should give you about 30 more points. Now, it's obviously not just about points, but one of the things that we discussed for a decade with Zero RB is that by drafting running backs, you're leaving actual points on the table. Now, the reason that Zero RB has been so dynamic and will continue to be so dynamic is it's not just that. There are other structural elements to it that really help, including the contingency-based element to running back scoring. And it's one of the reasons why, even though in a half PPR format, and especially now with ADP shifting, that you should be getting, this huge advantage for running backs, you still don't actually see it. And some of those things, I think, come back to one of the things that you brought up last week, which is how many players do you have live at the end of the season? And Zero RB is actually going to be a very favorable structure to have as many live players as possible, too. So a lot of things going on there. But if you hit, and I kind of referenced last week that there's always this chance to have a 2016 season again. It's going to hit at some point, probably not in any specific year that people are thinking of it, but then you're in really good shape. So mostly here, thinking of those running backs as being picks that will work as long as we do still end up with the wide receiver depth we want overall.
Yeah, and it can get tricky. And I do think the thing I immediately start thinking about is the issue Pat and I just ran into in our previous draft where we had CMC, we had Hurts, and then there was a distinct pocket of the draft where the wide receivers were still the value. But because we had made such a big bet on the Eagles and Dallas Goedert sitting there, allowing us to unlock an elite tight end build, it was really hard to pass that up. But then we felt behind the 8 ball the entire time. So I do think a lot when we double tap running back at the 2-3 turn, which I do think just looking at the value pockets of the draft, what we did, elite wide receiver followed by 2 running backs, was definitely taking what the room gave us. But now I'm immediately starting to think, could we afford an elite QB detour? Doesn't look like that's going to be available to us regardless. And then the big question is, could you afford an elite tight end detour here at the 4-5 turn? Or do we really need to hammer wide receivers as they fly off the board?
And I think we probably have to hammer those receivers. One of the things that is interesting, and you had I had mentioned that I was going to try and get you on board with 3 tight end. 3 tight end, I do think, is the way to play it when you get stuck like this. We'll go into more of that late, but those are probably the 3 guys I would be looking at. I do think that Walker is a really interesting play. He's massively undervalued just overall. But of those players, McLaurin is not someone I have as much of a target on, but I think he probably fits kind of what we're looking at here. Would that be your take?
Yeah, I like McLaurin a lot. And then I also, in general, in those spots, if I'm trying to have a final tiebreaker, I do like to do it based on ADP, just knowing that we'll probably get a chance to get other guys later. Yeah, the Walker stuff's interesting. I'm with you on that. Pat and I drafted Charbonnet in that last draft, but I'm with you on Kenneth Walker being a value anytime in the 5th, but I wonder with our structure if we might get too buried by the time it comes all the way back around to 71. You could also make a case for Hawkinson, but I kind of think Godwin structurally, what makes sense to you though?
Yeah, there's a little part of me that likes Hawkinson for that week 16, just massive blow up game with the Vikings. But
I did it.
We're in.
I have a recency bias too, Shawn. So the last good thing you said about a player is what's lingering in my head. So if we're going to set up the Hawkinson thing here. So we do run the risk now of similar spot where Pat and I took 2 detours, quarterback, tight end. And now we took 2 detours, a second running back in a tight end. So, if anything, we tie our hands behind our back and I make you come up with some deep wide receiver flyers that you can tell good stories about.
Well, I don't want to lean in too heavily to the players that you just drafted. I did think it was funny coming in and hearing you guys talk about the double bye. I do think that the best team that I've drafted so far, other than the quarterback situation, but both quarterbacks were amazing, had the same bye. So,
yeah, there you go.
So we can get through that 1 week, kind of like you guys were talking about. That's my favorite team. You draft that second quarterback with the same bye. You're thinking, should I draft the third one? But then, I mean, that'll be the draft where in the 18th round, you're actually given the perfect player as opposed to your third QB. So
J Mike in the chat, the full Siegele experience is keeping you waiting for who the actual pick should be until 5 seconds after the clock has ended. You know what? I think what I'm going to do is I'm building up a Siegele radar, though, where I can just kind of read the ebbs and flows of, your intonations and kind of know what you would actually do. And TJ Hawkinson was making a late surge there at the 4-5 turn.
Well, I was trying to wait on it long enough that we wouldn't get him. We were going to get timed out on Chris Godwin. But
yeah,
but
the problem is
Godwin is another guy who's massively undervalued. But you see here,
yeah.
I mean, it's a little bit tough to take someone. I mean, it's not, but you see what happens here in round 5, where the thing that we were looking at is that we want a receiver, but we take Hawkinson because the guy that we actually were going to pick doesn't go until the 5-11.
Right. Yeah, and there's, different ebbs and flows with this room. This room actually seems like the wide receiver ADPs, at least now in the 4th and 5th, are a little closer to where they were. We do have, of course, a huge badge brigade room here. Every single person with a red badge except one team here. So a lot of drafters who know what they're doing. Through 5 rounds, we have Ramondre Stevenson and Breece Hall at running back, Justin Jefferson and Terry McLaurin at wide receiver, and TJ Hawkinson at tight end here. And we do now start to see the wide receivers come off the board. Did you have any thoughts on the DeAndre Hopkins fallout? We see Marquise Brown come off the board at 65 here. Have you made any big adjustments in your ranks relative to that news?
I didn't have to make much in the way of adjustments, maybe compared to the industry. I think that Hopkins is not necessarily going to be in a dramatically better situation. And Marquise Brown was already going to be someone who, I mean, you can even argue that Hopkins being there would help him. It didn't happen last year, and so people tend to think, well, it's not going to happen again. But there were so many different injury elements involved in the specifics of what happened there.
So looking at this board here, what jumps out to you?
Well, I have Pickens so far in almost every draft. So to be able to add a Deontay Johnson makes a lot of sense there. I'm almost going to have to start passing up on Pickens to take some Deontay Johnson at times. But so that's perfect because, again, I mean, you see all those wide receivers wiped out in round 6. To get somebody who's a decent value by ADP there is helpful. I think you could go right back with Quentin Johnston, and he's somebody where in this draft it makes sense, but also, I mean, I would be shocked if his ADP doesn't continue to rise.
Yeah. And talk to me. So we do, for the audio listeners there, we do go with Deontay Johnson and Quentin Johnston at that 6-7 turn. I would say there was a chance some of the wide receivers got wiped out there. I'm feeling a little bit better about our Hawkinson detour there, knowing we got these 2 guys. Talk a bit about Quentin Johnston, because I don't know if people picked up on it last week, but you had a reference of being pretty low on Mike Williams relative to consensus, relative to ADP. And it sounds like part of that bearishness is fueled by excitement for Quentin Johnston.
It is. And Johnston ideally will be a much more well-rounded and explosive version of Williams. And I do think that Keenan Allen, who was fantastic over the final third of last season, could come out and be great. It's not going to be something where Johnston has to jump in and be a star immediately. And yet you're going to have some veterans drawing coverage. You're going to have this new offense. And so some of the things over the past couple of years that they even tried to force on Williams and he was unsuccessful with, you probably won't see that type of a thing. So Johnson has a chance to really come out there and separate. He was a piece that they picked up because they needed another guy. You're starting to have your starting receivers age out in a way that you don't want with your young QB, hopefully superstar. I mean, think about where people were last year on Burrow relative to Herbert and how those offenses were going to work. I mean, Johnston is a guy who, when we think about the quick adjustments of rookie wide receivers over the last several years, he's a guy who's in the perfect situation to make that leap if the new offense works. We're going to feel pretty comfortable with Justin Herbert. And one of the things with Johnston is, even though people have some contested catch issues with him. He's also a guy who is always open. When you have his length and then his leaping ability, I mean, you can fail to make some contested catches if your quarterback also just likes the fact that he can throw the ball up to you and you're available, whereas some of his other guys have not been. He's also amazing after the catch. So if you had a guy in Johnston who actually had very good yards per route numbers at TCU, if you have him actually as a better NFL player and he fits kind of that profile, I mean, then you're off to the races.
Yeah, he's a very fun selection. I'm kind of with you on surprised that he hasn't jumped up more to like Jordan Addison levels. You know, at this point, I'm surprised that they're not being valued similarly. Also on kind of how you think about Mike Williams vis-a-vis Quentin Johnston, it sounds like you kind of feel similarly about DK Metcalf relative to JSN, that based on your ranking of Metcalf, that the market isn't valuing enough the impact that JSN is going to have on this offense.
I think so. You have Metcalf there holding the other two guys down, which is nice. But I mean, one of the things that we've witnessed with Walker is that Charbonnet has knocked him, a round or two below where he should pretty clearly be. And yet in a situation where I think it actually makes a little bit more difference at wide receiver there with the Seahawks, you're not seeing that same kind of dynamic at play.
Yep. We are heading into the 8th round here, going to be on the clock at pick 95 in a few minutes. Our team so far, 2 running backs, Ramondre Stevenson and Breece Hall. Our wide receivers, we got 4 now, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, and Quentin Johnston. And our tight end, TJ Hawkinson. Here, definitely some later QB options for this team. Wide receivers, pretty firmly wiped off the board. The top available based on ranks and ADP: Michael Thomas, Jacoby Myers, Zay Jones, Tyler Boyd, Sky Moore. By just pure ranks here, it does look like a quarterback, running back sweet spot here. What's standing out to you?
Yeah, I like Cook as the potential play to get another really high upside running back. And one of the things anytime you take Breece Hall is that you have to be aware that maybe you're going to get off to a little bit slower start. I expect that so many of the teams that we draft will be young and they will be explosive for the second half of the season. We're going to have to fight my own tendencies to kind of be aware of that and just to take, some selections that balance it out from time to time. What do you think on the QB situation here? Obviously, we wouldn't want to lose Cousins when we've got a couple of his guys. It seems like he could fall through, but there may not be another player that is a necessity.
That's my thing here. I'm putting Kirk Cousins in the queue right now. I mean, the Addison drafter's behind us, so we block him, but going all the way to pick 119 with a lot of teams pushing quarterback, it's probably like a 35 to 40% chance he comes back, but because the opportunity cost isn't super high, like if there was a wide receiver we liked or a screaming value, I'd be like, let's just do it. Let's push it. But I didn't see anything else really jumping out to me there as we do select Kirk Cousins.
I agree. And I mean, I've always been willing to take pretty big risks on the QBs coming back. QB is a spot where you can occasionally get some huge ADP values. And so especially if you have some other reaches on your draft, you can do some fun things in terms of getting a little bit more unique, getting an extra player plus your QB if you take some of those risks. And yet, I mean, there just wasn't a compelling argument for someone else for us there.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where it's a little easier to push it from the middle of the room, right? Because you can say, hey, you can look at the backside of the board and be like, hey, these teams already have QBs. It's only 10 or 11 picks until we're up next. Whereas when you are on that turn or near the turn, I mean, at 20-some picks, you can see runs happen. I do want to circle back on the James Cook stuff. His ADP has seemed somewhat solidified, although I do sense a ton of enthusiasm for Damian Harris. Do you view those guys as being able to kind of coexist or both return on their ADPs, that they'll be used differently? Or do you view it as, hey, James Cook could really surge and take over this backfield?
I think Cook could really surge. He's probably not going to be the type of player. I mean, he's going to be in that Tony Pollard type of mold, right? Ideally. Now, he's not as good as Pollard in all likelihood. And there are some structural elements about the Bills' offense that maybe give you pause. And at the same time, I just think this is a great way to get some exposure to Buffalo in a situation where, I mean, just think about if that offense stays explosive, but they shift slightly in terms of their play calling. And maybe the catalyst for that is James Cook. Well, then you have a complete tournament winning thesis for him there. I do like Damian Harris. And one of the cool things about the Stack Explorer is it does tend to show that if you have a QB wide receiver pairing and then take the RB2 with them, it juices your advanced rates kind of across the board, which is kind of cool. So he's someone, when you have kind of that Diggs, Allen, early, 1-2, that I think you'd be looking at, especially if he falls. But I guess I would expect to see a little bit larger gap between those two guys at some point, or we get some Damian Harris hype and maybe they actually just flip. So I think those ADPs will be interesting to track. And it kind of highlights too, where we do still have quite a bit of running back uncertainty at this time of the draft season.
Yeah, I think for people, it is almost just like an imagination or storytelling thing. It's so easy to tell yourself the story. Damian Harris is the goal line back on one of the best offenses in football. We've already seen him rack up a massive touchdown year. Ergo, he's going to do the same thing in Buffalo. Whereas James Cook, it takes a little more imagination. We haven't seen what does it look like if he gets more touches a game, what if he catches a few more balls a game, if his role grows. And so I think that ambiguity is keeping his price in check in a pretty nice way. I'm with you on him. I forget what it said my exposure was, but I've been taking him a fair amount. Yeah, I'm almost double the field on James Cook right now. We are heading up to our 10th round pick here at 10-11. Our team so far: Kirk Cousins, Ramondre Stevenson, Breece Hall, and James Cook. Our wide receivers still at 4: Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Quentin Johnston, and our tight end, TJ Hawkinson. Pure value wise, it is looking like another running back area, but we also have a guy like Sky Moore, Romeo Dobbs, if we wanted a Minnesota bring back. What do you like here?
Well, part of it is the wide receiver enthusiasm, but Kerrane is well below. And
yeah,
to balance out all of those Javonte Williams teams, and also to just balance the Breece Hall selection there. When you think about what Sean Payton has done for his backs, and yes, it's going to be different with Russell Wilson. That could be a hugely limiting effect, but I mean, it's such a great pick, I think.
We do take Samaje Perine here. We are on the clock. 22 seconds left. Do we want to grab a fifth wide receiver here, or something else jumping out to you?
Well, what do you think about Herbert there?
Talk to me about Herbert. Let's do it. I assume we're done at running back after this pick. Or close
Probably.
Yeah.
The thing with him, and it was interesting even before they added Roschon, that with Herbert and D'Onta Foreman, you got, I think, two of the top 6 guys in rushing yards over expected from last season by Next Gen. Herbert has fantastic advanced stats that you can pull up in our, I guess, aptly named advanced stat tool and see what he's doing in terms of evasion rate, see what he's doing in terms of yards after contact. He's a player where if you don't have that Johnson pick drop down on top of him, then to add a third guy where suddenly we're in the mix with 3, then there's no way that you're going to be able to get him in that range, because the skill level that he has, or the talent that he's demonstrated so far, is elite. And it's going to be so difficult to focus on any of those 3 running backs when you have Justin Fields as such a dynamic rusher himself. Plus now you have a lot more vertical ability in their passing attack. So this offense in Chicago is one that, even though we talked last week on the show, I mean, DJ Moore probably overvalued. There are going to be some landmines that you can hit, but overall that offense could end up being a leap offense. Now you still need some things to happen in your favor for Herbert to be the guy who really benefits. But one of the interesting things once we get into this range with the running backs is that when you're basically looking at Chicago, New Orleans, and Miami as the 3 offenses that you could really select from, because they have too many players.
9 running backs right there. Yeah.
And so, it's going to knock those guys down. It has to. And yet at the same time, when you're talking about individual weeks, when you're talking about playoff weeks, the upside potential from those offenses and from those specific backs, I mean, the backs are interesting, right? So we're going to have some hits there.
How do you think, because I do know one thing, we talked about it a little bit last week with your love for Jalen Waddle relative to Tyreek Hill. You know, in previous years, you've played the Eagles through Devontae Smith relative to a more expensive A.J. Brown. Now we're talking about these running back rooms where it almost seems like you're maybe a little more inclined to play it through the more expensive back because you think the market is properly factoring in kind of the talent level there. Because I definitely have had that issue. Like, I've been loving Mostert and Wilson as the cheaper options in the Dolphins room, and even taking a lot of Deontay Foreman just because he's so cheap relative to that. But it sounds like we just want to take a humility-based approach. One of these guys can emerge. Herbert's still the best bet to do so. And if he does, he is going to massively outperform that ADP.
I think that that's true. And I mean, you and I drafted Kendre Miller last week. I've got a lot of Roshan. Because the upside is so significant, and you know, when it's not going to be 4 or 5 drafts that we do, I mean, you're obviously going to do a huge number. I do think you want to have some of those other options sprinkled in.
Yep. So a lot of wide receivers continuing to go off the board here. Might need to get a little creative, Shawn. I'm going to need to see you pulling out some picks here, unless you see another position if we keep punting wide receiver.
Well, I don't know that it's too early to take a Marvin Mims.
I did it last draft. I mean, I think we're in that portion here. We get our little week 17 mini correlation here. I'm up to an ungodly amount of Marvin Mims, but in this room, I do think we're going to have to recover at wide receiver. We do select Marvin Mims here in the 12th round at pick 143, back on the clock here at the beginning of the 13th. What do you see?
Well, we took Cole Kmet last time. I just feel like he's going to be that guy that I inadvertently get more than I want. I don't want to go that direction again. I mean, it's so far ahead of ADP on Wandale and Tyquan, but my own ranks are also just massively ahead of ADP on those guys. So
I don't think we have a choice in this room. I go ahead and select Wandale Robinson as well. Talk to me about those two guys, right? Because you know, we dealt with this wide receiver avalanche in the last draft with Pat. You know, one thing I was mentioning is you can get away with it if you have some of these conviction plays in the double-digit rounds that you think are massively undervalued. It sounds like you think Marvin Mims and Wandale Robinson, maybe we took them at more appropriate values, but based on ADP, it sounds like you think those guys could really outperform.
Yeah, and part of it is simply that outside of maybe taking the Chiefs players, DeAndre Hopkins is a real wild card in terms of what it's going to mean. Because if he ends up with the Chiefs, which I don't think that he will, then I mean, the prices that you have in this draft on Rashee Rice and Sky Moore, even though I like both of those guys, and I'd be hard pressed to think that they're going to both bust again. You look at the dynasty price on Rice, and it's really strange because the only reason he's so cheap in Dynasty is because Sky Moore missed last season. There were some similarities to what they did in the draft that would concern you, and you would prefer that they had taken Mims. And yet, it's weird that drafters are pattern matching so strongly in a way that probably doesn't make sense. But in a lot of these best ball drafts, you're not necessarily getting that. You still have somewhat enthusiastic prices on Rice and Moore. Those players are interesting, although, I mean, whether they're more or less interesting in an avalanche draft is sort of a separate question. But you get beyond that, and I think there are only 4 truly draftable wide receivers from wide receiver 60 to wide receiver 90, which, I mean, again, that's why you have avalanche drafts. That's why covering yourself at the position in the first 7 rounds is so crucial. And that's why, even though something like the win the flex and all of the other analyses looking at running back scoring and how it contrasts with wide receivers early, I mean, that's why you have to be on wide receiver.
So how do you think about that? Because you just said, there's only a couple wide receivers you think are even worth selecting. Looking back, one of the P. Ryan or Herbert picks, does that feel like a luxury pick or maybe unnecessarily playing chicken with the draft room, knowing, hey, I might massively have to reach for one of those guys and they might not even be there because the draft room might agree that those are the last remaining good players. So how are you thinking about that when you're staring down an avalanche room and you do kind of take maybe structurally luxury picks in P. Ryan and Herbert?
I guess I still like those picks. I think that if you have 4 guys who are draftable, then you try and take those 4 guys. Now, someone who, as opposed to just starting to take some of those guys earlier, I don't know the other wide receivers who have been drafted. If you have a heavy Dolphins team, then I think that you can pick Beckham, but otherwise, I just don't think there's any point in having him. Rondell Moore is someone that I've been massively above ADP on. Now that shifts a little bit, but when you're talking about the 11-12 turn, it's probably not as exciting. I think with the early selection of Terry McLaurin, that Curtis Samuel is someone who might have been interesting, because in this specific iteration of the Commanders' offense, you could see him as someone who really jumps up and makes the case for himself. So that was one that maybe because of who we had already taken should have been a little bit more in play. But I feel pretty good really about where we are, perhaps because I'm very enthusiastic about the early wide receivers that we have.
Yeah. So we are at right now 1-5-6-1 build, coming up on our 14th round pick 167 here. Still have some stack options available based on players we have selected. And the room is almost daring us to take Cole Kmet here at pick 167, Shawn.
They are. The thing that happens anytime that you take Cole Kmet is that you want your 17th and 18th round picks to be tight ends, and you just no longer do that. And so
in the bye week bros might be after us, 2 week 13 buys. I don't know if you care about that. Real quick, what do you want to do here?
What would you like at quarterback?
I think we have, a big bet here on Deontay Johnson. I think Kenny Pickett, makes a ton of sense here if we're, running out of guys who we feel confident about their job security. I feel like Kenny Pickett looks like a good selection there.
So one of the things that did happen for folks listening on at home is that Tyquan Thornton did not make it back to us. So
he didn't.
That was what made the last discussion.
Chipsy takes the bullet on Cole Kmet, 22nd, Shawn. I'm showing you the board here at the top. Any wide receivers you can tell a story on here?
No, let's go back to the tight end again. Yeah, who do you like?
I'm just going to put Trey McBride in to get us a selection here. Trey McBride would have been one of those guys that I think should be getting a bit of an ADP bump relative to the Hopkins news. I know Pat was bringing up some stuff with Zach Ertz there. You do have Mike Gesicki ahead of him in these rankings, but you can play the ADP game a little bit there. We do select Trey McBride and Kenny Pickett. So we're at a 2-5-6-2 here. You are going to be forced to come up with some wide receivers you like late, though.
We talk about having the live players, and we talk about, how do we maximize some of the elements of the team in a weird draft like this? And I think that you can go away from the structure a little bit to make sure that you have live guys. And I think that you can also go away from the structure a little bit to kind of think outside the box on how that flex position will be filled. And so that is the element with that portion of it. Now, Trey McBride is somebody who I think should be going much, much earlier. I was pulling up our ADP tracking portion of the tool, where kind of looking at what the response was to the DeAndre Hopkins release. And he jumps because people think he's going to go to either the Bills or the Chiefs. Those 2 receivers jump. Rondell Moore takes a big leap, and you can understand why that would be the case. But Trey McBride more or less doesn't move, which I think is really strange when you consider where he was drafted last year, how athletic he is, the fact that they now need targets, and that over the last 6 weeks of last season, he started to draw targets, which really manifested in that week 17 game where he had 10 targets, 7 receptions, 70+ yards, and a touchdown. I'm not saying that his games are going to mostly be like that. They won't. But he's someone, especially at the price, where your exposure on him should be extremely high. And it's also kind of fun when you have Eagles teams, obviously, to go that direction. I mean, so many of the guys that we've had a shot at here haven't really fit with some of the other players that we've had, which has been kind of an extra little consideration as we look at what we're doing with the build. I'm pulling up the RCE to see kind of just how much I think that we can stretch it on this wide receiver situation.
Yeah, so while Shawn looks this up, I'll recap the team again. So we have the Kirk Cousins double stack to Justin Jefferson and TJ Hawkinson. We have a Kenny Pickett stack to Deontay Johnson. Our running backs are Ramondre Stevenson, Breece Hall, James Cook, Samaje Perine, Khalil Herbert in nice shape there. Our other wide receivers, Terry McLaurin, Quentin Johnston, Marvin Mims, and Wan'Dale Robinson. And then that other tight end with Hawkinson is Trey McBride. We have 3 more picks coming down the pike. Tons of quarterbacks still on the board. Kyler sliding here, ADP of 150, sliding all the way down here into the mid 180s. Wide receiver, you're in just total dart throw range with a lot of these guys. I don't know if there's any correlation stuff we would want to consider. Our bringbacks for Minnesota and Pittsburgh would be Seattle and Green Bay, but not a ton kicking around with those guys either.
Well, we took Josh Palmer last time. I don't love that selection, but he is a player who exists.
Do you regret agreeing to do this show where we stream our drafts with some of the toughest drafters on Underdog as just like a purely masochistic exercise?
No, not at all. I do regret taking TJ Hawkinson, but I mean, he's going to be the guy when we look back that won the whole thing for us. So
it's so funny that was the theme of these 2 drafts of tight end detours that made sense for the team because you set up the premium double stacks when Dallas Goedert in the first draft with Pat Hawkinson, but then just noticing, the big opportunity cost of, who do we take there? You could take Godwin, I think was the guy we were debating, and how much he changes kind of the profile of this wide receiver room. But Shawn, we can't get timed out here. We're going to be on the clock here at 16:11. Anything standing out to you here? Potentially a third QB, a deep wide receiver. We could just do the Palmer thing. Like you said, we got the Denver Perine, we got the James Cook back-to-back minis there.
Yeah, you also have an option to take Paris Campbell in case you have issues with Wan'Dale Robinson and his recovery or just the usage. So I think that those are some interesting picks. Cedric Tillman is someone who, I mean, if Deshaun Watson bounces back, then there's at least, again, like you said, a story that you can tell yourself there. The Bills are also just way down in terms of where they are with their pass catchers. And so from that perspective, I think that Devontae Parker is kind of interesting. He's someone who, was always overdrafted, and yet you get in the situation here where he's available late and the price is nothing. And then he starts to make more sense than he had, for the past 5 or 6 years.
Let's do it. We go Josh Palmer, Devontae Parker, at least 2 when you're kind of plugging your nose with some of these late wide receiver picks, if you can. And you were kind of mentioning it, like, when are the times you get exposure to a Curtis Samuel? Well, it's when you're building out something with the Commanders or the Niners. Here we do have the Denver Buffalo stuff with the Chargers, and then also Devontae Parker. We already made a bet on Ramondre Stevenson. And I think we could also maybe have the conversation of whether Mac Jones, if he comes back, if this would potentially be a 3 quarterback build, or if we're taking, I guess it would be another tight end or wide receiver most likely there. Do you have any kind of lean on how you would approach this structurally?
Well, in this particular build, the RC does prefer that third tight end over the third QB. I do think that Cousins and Pickett are guys where you might like to have a hybrid free QB at the end to give yourself a little bit more upside. So there are obviously some names out there that makes sense from that perspective. And even though that's not what the roster construction explorer says, I would be tempted perhaps to go that particular route, just to, again, look at this situation with the receivers. When you take that wide receiver 5 in the double-digit rounds, your win rates do really fall through the floor. But as you're mentioning, you do want to then get up to 8 of them if you can. And that third tight end can be another way to have a touchdown potential guy to fill that flex position.
Yep. So this draft is speeding along here. Our final team, we're going to have one more selection at 18-11. Shawn just mentioned it. Our 2 quarterbacks, Kirk Cousins and Kenny Pickett. Running backs, Ramondre Stevenson, Breece Hall, James Cook, Samaje Perine, Khalil Herbert. Wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Quentin Johnston, Marvin Mims, Wan'Dale Robinson, Joshua Palmer, Devontae Parker. Tight ends, TJ Hawkinson, Trey, McBride. When I have it set up here by ranks, we're definitely, I think, out of the market for these running backs. It looks like it is going to be a QB or tight end pick. There's lots of stuff you could do, right? You get Sam Howell does go, so no stack there. You mentioned some of the upside plays at quarterback if you wanted to do something with a San Francisco quarterback. And then we also have lots of tight ends we like. Noah Fant there as potential mini with Deontay Johnson, Hunter Henry if we're building out the Patriots bet. What stands out to you?
Well, Howell would have been the perfect pick, especially when you do get Terry McLaurin on this particular team. I think that he is going to score well beyond where he's being drafted. It's another one of those things where, again, you can't complain about having the second pick, but even in round 18, there are some issues where the guy that is undervalued by 6 rounds. That's where he's going to go. Shot. But no fan.
Okay. See, we were on the same wavelength there, but I didn't want to take it for granted here.
Yes, sorry.
The third time.
Board
go ahead.
Stopped moving the cross, and so I didn't see it.
Oh, my bad. So talk about So you mentioned it was if Howell was there, is it pretty close for you on the third tight end or the third quarterback?
I think if he's there, he's such a massive smash play that it would overrule anything else that you're trying to do. Because I think that you look at our team and Kirk Cousins is the most important player because of the early selections. But in terms of the quarterback who's going to score the most points, I think it's really close with Sam Howell. So you add that in. That's a huge value too. But one of the reasons to think about 3 tight end builds, and one of the reasons to, again, avoid the TJ Hawkinson pick, which it's just so difficult because, Hawkinson is a tournament winner type of player. If you have that elite tight end score, and it doesn't even have to be all season, but you get it in the playoffs 1 or 2 times, and that completely changes where you are versus everyone else. Now, is Hawkins still going to be that with Jordan Addison on the team as well? I think it depends a lot on how much of the target volume he takes, because he's another one like Quentin Johnston, where it's interesting to see that his ADP is actually very enthusiastic. He is someone who, again, kind of a dynasty, you're looking at those guys being right in the same spot. But Johnston seems like the player who probably is in a better situation for immediate production. And I think that you can tell a story where he has more upside as a prospect too. But both of these guys, huge range of outcomes, but then to be drafted at the level they're drafted at, especially Addison, is interesting. People are obviously excited about this Minnesota offense. So you have those 3 guys together, and I really like that part of it. But you can again see where if you don't get the 5 receivers in the first 7 rounds, then you get a team like we have here. And one of the things with our very last pick, Noah Fant, which again, almost missed there, is that, Fant is more or less not drafted.
Yeah.
And yet he's an easy selection where if he were this year's TJ Hawkinson, where, as an athlete, he's even well ahead of Hawkinson. That offense in the next stage of Geno Smith and how well he played last year, that takes the next step as opposed to regressing. You've got another guy out there with JSN. What if mostly what happens is that Metcalf and Lockett lose a lot of value and Fant either emerges or they sort of showcase him for a trade? If Fant would move to a team like Hawkinson did last year, where they actually want to use him, you're talking about a top 5 tight end, who again is basically not getting drafted. So you have that option late. It fit with our build. We're looking really good at scoring everywhere except for those last 2 wide receivers, which again, I mean, that is important. That is the puzzle.
Yep, it is. And we will continue to navigate these Badge Brigade rooms. The final team here for the audio listeners, shout out to everyone listening on the Rotoviz podcast network. We stream these drafts on my YouTube channel every Wednesday, the first draft with the defending Best Ball Mania champ, Pat Kerrane. You can find the audio to that show on my podcast feed, In a Vacuum podcast, and then all of the Shawn drafts will be available on the Rotoviz podcast feed. But our team here, Shawn, Kirk Cousins and Kenny Pickett at quarterback, our running backs, Ramondre Stevenson, Breece Hall, James Cook, Samaje Perine, Khalil Herbert, our wide receivers, Justin Jefferson, Terry McLaurin, Deontay Johnson, Quentin Johnston, Marvin Mims, Wan'Dale Robinson, Joshua Palmer, Devontae Parker. ADP is a social construct. And our tight ends, TJ Hawkinson, Trey McBride, and Noah Fant. Shawn, what do you got coming down the pipeline at Rotoviz this week?
Well, Blair Andrews just released his first 9 rounds, so single-digit rounds, the players that he is looking to build around in Underdog. It probably won't come as a surprise to listeners that in almost every case, he and I had a pure mind meld on that. You want to check that out. He goes through a variety of the evidence-based reasons for selecting those players. Pete, I have the Elite QB, the 5 components, but I'm also going to do a contrarian Elite QB build that's hyper fragile, kind of work through how you have to then execute the rest of the way to make that work. Again, looking at the roster construction explorer and kind of matching that in with an actual draft to show how that works and move through it. Individual players, the week 16 stacks and correlation, week 17, how to make an Elite QB team but a hyper fragile team get together, win you the $3 million.
Can I give you a homework assignment to do sometime this summer, Shawn? I need an article of your brain, the RCE, the data, how to navigate a wide receiver avalanche room. That's the piece I need, Shawn, because this is my life. All 150 drafts streamed with these assholes taking all the wide receivers I like. I need that piece. Can I get that piece on the site at some point this summer?
We'll have articles up about the drafts that you and I have done.
Okay.
So obviously there's
go.
a little promotion of the show in there, but also looking at the things that you're going to run into. Because one of the things that you run into all the time, you asked me if I regret it. I mean, this is the highlight of my week.
No,
but
I love it.
Do you regret streaming all 150 of your drafts? The fact that you are in these avalanches and are going to be dealing with that, and yet you'll be able to develop the pivots that you need, the detours that you need to make that work, and knowing that, I mean, there are some positives to drafting with the best players as well, in that they are less likely to hurt themselves in order to hurt you in the second half of drafts, which you will see if you're in a draft, with no badges. And it's not even that people are necessarily trying to do that, but just the level of familiarity with how these drafts work isn't as strong. Sometimes, you draft at 2:00 Eastern, those of us on the West Coast, you can get some very interesting drafts. And so I like the fact that I get a lot of contrast in the drafts. But where's the starting point on that with the wide receiver avalanche? I mentioned that you have to get 5 in the first 7. We didn't do that today, but it was a very specific situation where Hawkinson with Justin Jefferson, and that we were in a situation that is pretty unusual where the wide receivers were gone by the time they hit us in round 2. And I think round 2 is a spot where, again, you've got to get a wide receiver.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I do like the getting really unique running back rooms. And I know there's a lot of sharks that don't necessarily announce it, and they're probably having a harder time getting in these rooms this year, but they willingly wanted to hop into these rooms because it allowed them to get access to certain builds, certain combinations of running backs that they weren't able to get in traditional rooms. So it's just towing that line, right? It's making sure you're not just getting so buried at wide receiver while also still enjoying some of the benefits that come from those unique rooms. And I should also mention the giveaway rolls on when I hit 15,000 subscribers on my YouTube channel, I'm going to give away $1,500, $500 to 3 different winners. Every time you leave a comment on one of my stream drafts, that gets you an entry. So however many streams I end up doing, that will be the max amount of entries available. So the second this show ends, you can leave a comment and that will get you an entry into that giveaway. And on a really good pace here, on a great pace to hit 15K subs by the end of the summer, hopefully well before then if we stay at this pace. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Make sure you are subscribed to Rotoviz. I got the links down below. Highly recommend checking out Shawn's work over there. All the great work referencing from Blair Andrews, Connor O'Driscoll, all kinds of great contributors. It is a really great companion piece to working through hot best ball summer. I will be back for another draft this afternoon on the Swolecast at 2 p.m. and then ship chasing tonight at 9:15. Shawn and I will be back as always every Wednesday at 11 a.m. Eastern. Appreciate all you guys hanging out in the chat. Hope you have a great rest of the week. Good luck surviving your avalanches. We'll see you guys next time. Peace.